Outstanding. Good afternoon. Welcome to House Economic Matters Bill Hearings. It's February the 16th, 2022. And before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that you are being recorded at all times. If your face is visible, it means people can see what you've been doing. I would ask you to keep yourself muted until you're unmuted. And for all those paying attention, please know that the chat is only for members. And lastly, to make it clear again, that once we have this hearing, once we've had a hearing on a bill, it is a live ball. If you have any issues, get your amendments in and your communication in as soon as possible, because live balls can be shot at any time. Let's start today with Delegate Queen, House Bill 804.
Okay, well, good afternoon. Greetings, Chairman Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and members of the Economic Matters Committee. I will start with HB 800, the Emergency Management Price Gouging Consumer Protection Bill. So what this bill does is during states of...
Sorry, Delegate, it's House Bill 804.
Oh, sorry.
We'll do 800 a little later on. You got a lot of witnesses for that once we're trying to get the small ones out of the way. Is that all right?
That is fine.
Thank you.
We'll start again. For the record of Delegate Queen, greetings, Chairman Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and my colleagues in the Economic Matters Committee. So HB 804, the Commissioner of Financial Regulations Enhanced Consumer Protection Enforcement Tools, is a bill that really just allows for the Office of Commission and Financial Regulations to investigate and enforce actions of unfair, deceptive, or abusive acts and practices in consumer transactions involving non-depository entities and persons. And so since 2017, the office has had this ability. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that the provisions are outlined in law. And so examples of non-depository entities include insurance companies, pension funds, security firms, and finance companies. And so this bill, HB 804, will enable the OCFR to carry out its mission to protect Marylanders with fair practices identified with 3 new provisions. So one thing that HB 804 does is going to regulate entities from advertising, making representations, or engaging in acts that are false, misleading, unfair, deceptive, and injurious to the public interest. And these are the same provisions which our state banks already have and are subject to under our current law. And so we're extending these provisions to all regulated entities to increase consumer protection, level the competitive environment, and promote responsible business competition. Secondly, HB 804 prohibits any anti-competitive practices, such as imposing as a condition for a loan restrictions on obtaining credit, property, or services from a competitor, unless those restrictions are reasonable and necessary to secure the loan. And thirdly, HB 804 allows for certain information sharing by the commissioner to enable participation in multi-state enforcement and regulatory activities. So this is an important consumer protection bill for many vulnerable Marylanders who have experienced unfair, deceptive, and abusive acts or practices from financial institutions. And so we seek a favorable recommendation for HB 804. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, we'll go on to our first and only witness for this hearing, which is Antonio Salazar.
Good afternoon, Chair Wilson. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Crosby and distinguished committee members. For the record, I'm Tony Salazar, Commissioner of Financial Regulation, and I want to thank Delegates Queen and Hill for their sponsorship of House Bill 804, which I'm here to testify in support of and also request a favorable committee report on. As Delegate Queen has just mentioned, my office's mission is to protect Marylanders through the operation of a modern financial regulatory system that promotes the respect for consumers and fair competition, so we have a strong state economy. In order to accomplish those goals, my office needs to have a broad array of enforcement powers so it can take advantage of the network supervisory tools and efforts that the state financial regulators have developed and are continuing to modernize. Delegate Queen's bill provides that ability, and it fills a gap in our office's enforcement authority that was first identified by the General Assembly's Commission on Consumer Financial Protection back in 2017. Under this bill, regulated non-depository entities that are subject to my office's jurisdiction are prohibited from, as you heard, advertising, making representations, or engaging in acts that are false, misleading, unfair, or injurious to the public interest. So it updates Maryland law to better allow our office to continue to engage in the network supervisory efforts and coordinate with other states. Currently, Maryland chartered banks are subject to these restrictions. So while the bill doesn't impact them, it does level the competitive environment. I believe the bill is a warranted extension of law to give my office the ability to keep up with marketplace activity and address the broad range of actions that have been undertaken by non-depository entities. This law is not intended to change the existing law on false, misleading, unfair, or deceptive practices. It's intended to provide my office with the ability to address those in the non-depository space and join other states when they're going after or engaging in supervision of multi-state non-depository entities. So in sum, the bill implements the recommendation of the Consumer Financial Protection Commission to enhance my office's authority. And as I've just described, it generally supports our ability to effectively participate in current and future multi-state network supervisory activities. So with that, Mr. Chair, I request a favorable committee report, and I am happy to answer any questions or provide additional information that the committee may request.
Seeing no questions, sir, thank you very much for your presentation. That concludes this bill hearing at 8:04.
Thank
Moving
you.
on to Delegate Chi, House Bill 722.
Thank you, Chair Wilson, and good afternoon, my fellow colleagues, ECM. For the record, Delegate Lily Chi here to present HB 722, Corporations and Associations Annual Filing Fees. HB 722 is the result of my bill advanced by this committee last year to require SDET, the State Department of Assessment Taxation, to evaluate Maryland's competitiveness among neighboring jurisdictions, in fact, across all 50 states, in business filing fees and the requirements. Not surprisingly, the SDET study finds that Maryland is the least competitive among the neighboring jurisdictions when factoring in the frequency and the fee structure of business filings. Currently, most Maryland businesses are required to file an annual report and pay $300 to SDET. Even before my legislative days, I heard many complaints from small businesses that charging them $300 annual fee for the privilege of doing business in Maryland flies in the face of our desire to encourage entrepreneurship and business growth. And I want to remind my colleagues that this is not a tax. It's in addition to the taxes they have to pay, it's a fee. Many startups have no revenues and still have to pay that fee, which is an annual reminder of our attitude toward businesses. As this committee is well aware, many legislators in the past years, including members of this committee from both parties, have tried to introduce legislation to lessen the burdens of filing fees for small businesses, including Chair Wilson, who last year sponsored and we passed the bill to waive fees for businesses to sunset in Maryland. I want to call your attention today to the amendments I'm trying to put in, and the legislative staff just said that because of a technical change, they are still trying to make the adjustments. But the bill I'm presenting now is different from the one that's posted online. So I want to make that important distinction. HB 722, as I intend to amend, will do three things. One, it removes the $300 business filing fees for online filing, which is the same as the bill you heard last week, HB 409, sponsored by the Speaker on behalf of the Governor. In addition, my bill will also remove the $100 filing fee for all the family farms in Maryland. And for all of the businesses, whether they need to pay or not, they only need to file every other year from now on under this bill, instead of annually. Online filing is what most small businesses are already doing today. And it's very encouraging that SDET told me that 94% of new businesses registered in the past year actually registered online. Online filing costs far less for both SDET staff and for businesses, and also avoids delays and human errors. On top of that, this pandemic has made remote work a way of life for many people, including entrepreneurs, who can start and run their businesses from their own homes and register their business anywhere they choose. They don't have to register with the state of Maryland. By adopting this bill, Maryland would not only encourage business startups here, but would be joining a growing number of states that are proactively incentivizing online filing. This bill is introduced in collaboration with SDET, which confirmed that the filing every other year would not create any administrative problems, including keeping businesses in good standing. I'm also very pleased with the strong support from the business community, as you will see from the list of written testimonies that have been submitted. So thank you for your consideration for a favorable report.
Thank you very much. We have Ashley Bagwell.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Ashley Bagwell here this afternoon on behalf of the Greater Bethesda Chamber of Commerce in strong support of House Bill 722. I'd like to thank Delegate Chi for introducing this bill. Very simply put, we support bills that either lower or eliminate fees for businesses, especially one as common sense is the one proposed in this bill. And so for that reason, we urge a favorable vote on House Bill 722. Thank you.
All right, seeing no questions, that concludes the hearing on this bill. Now we're moving on to House Bill 661. Is Delegate Barnes available? All right, I believe we'll have to continue this. I know there was a family emergency for Delegate Fennell, so we'll move on to House Bill 800, Delegate Queen.
All right, thank you. Excuse me one second, sorry. Sorry about that, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and colleagues from the Economic Matters Committee. HB 800, the Emergency Management Price Gouging Consumer Protections Bill, is basically looking at during states of emergency called by the governor. HB 800 is codifying many of the provisions, most of the provisions that Governor Hogan did during his price gouging order implemented during the height of COVID-19 pandemic. HB 800 prohibits selling of essential goods or services for more than a certain increase during a state of emergency. Essential goods and services include food, fuel, medicine, medical supplies, lodging, and other products and services designated as essential by the governor. So you may ask, why are we doing this? Because the governor can do this. Well, this is for future governors. This bill ensures that Maryland's policies to protect consumers during times of emergencies are consistent, predictable, and known. 39 states, Guam, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the District of Columbia have statutes or regulations that define and prohibit price gouging during a time of disaster or emergency. Florida, which encounters many hurricanes and storms, has a price gouging law to protect consumers for items and services essential to preparing for or recovering from storms. In Florida, a normal season has 14 named storms and 7 hurricanes, including 3 major hurricanes. For HB 800, price gouging in our state will be defined as price increases over 10% of essential goods and services. This bill seeks to have Maryland to join the majority of states to better protect Maryland consumers during their most vulnerable times. This is an important consumer protection bill for all Marylanders. I seek a favorable recommendation for HB 800. And there is some language we may want to clarify in the bill working with council, but overall, we want you to support the intent of this bill and the recommendations for this bill.
Thank you
If
very much.
possible, can my panel talk next?
Okay, who's your panel? Give them to me in order that you'd like them to be called, please.
So we would like from the Office of Attorney General, Steve Sakamoto Wango. And then there's another person from the Office of Attorney General.
Shelley Martin,
Yes.
that's your panel? Outstanding. We don't usually do this for those of us who don't send panels in ahead of time, but she's a member of the committee, so obviously we make the exception. Steve Sakamoto Wingo, please, are you here?
I'm here.
Outstanding. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Steve Sakamoto Wengel on behalf of the Consumer Protection Division of the Office of the Attorney General, and we're here in strong support of House Bill 800 and want to thank Delegate Queen for sponsoring this bill. When we encounter some kind of natural disaster or the pandemic in Maryland, and we get complaints that people are jacking up prices just because they can, we don't have a law in Maryland that we can assist them with. And so we have to say, well, we're sorry, we can't help you there. And fortunately, during the pandemic, the General Assembly did give us price gouging authority temporarily. We did receive hundreds of complaints about price gouging during the pandemic, and we were able to resolve those through an informal process of working with the business where the complaint was filed. In the past, when we've sought price gouging legislation, including a bill back in 2013 that was shepherded through the House by former Chairman Davis and by Delegate Pena-Melnick, a lot of the opposition was, well, we're going to send our products elsewhere if we have a price gouging statute in Maryland. But all the surrounding states have it. There were no disasters while the price gouging bill was temporarily in effect. And we think that it worked out very well, and it's time to have a permanent price gouging statute in Maryland. One quick note, the nurses I know are concerned about being charged for having their salaries increased to what they're worth. We think that their concerns are already addressed by the bill, and the bill would not need to be amended to address their concerns. So we urge a favorable report. Thank you very much.
Seeing no questions, moving on to Shelley Martin. Is Shelley Martin available? Wait, I see a hand, Delegate Arentz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
She doesn't have a link.
Okay, Mr. Sakamoto Wengel, you mentioned that you received numerous complaints. How many did you receive?
Well, we it's set forth in testimony in 2020, we received 736 complaints. In 2021, we received 107 complaints.
Okay, how many of them were real?
I
I know they were all complaints, but how many did you find with a problem?
Well, if we thought that what the complaint, at least on its face, showed that it violated the statute that was in effect at that time, we would contact the business and try to see if they were able to justify their prices. In other cases, the business, rolled back price increases, and in other cases, we never did hear back from the business. But so it was all over the place. But we were able to resolve those complaints amicably without having to file charges.
Were there real crimes being committed? Were they not able to justify them? And what did you do if they didn't justify them?
That was where my colleague, and I'm not sure why, where she is right now, Shelley Martin was the one who was overseeing that implementation of that program. And so if she's able to get on, then
I just sent her
if not,
the
I'll
link.
have her
She
get
should
back to
She
you.
should be here in a minute. I just sent her the link.
That's fine, and we'll move on. We can always come back to her when she gets on. Just send me a text when you guys see her.
So I'll get to ask that question again then?
Definitely, Steve, whatever you need to do.
Sure. Thank you.
Delegate Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So also to Mr. Sakamoto Wengel, how many complaints, sir, have you received from folks about alleged price gouging where you did an investigation and found out what really was happening was inflation?
Well, the statute that we have would account for that. So, I mean, the bill provides that before we would bring an action against a business, we have to contact them 28 days in advance. And one of the defenses they're able to raise would be that their costs have increased. And so in that case, it would not be price gouging under House Bill 800. And that's built in to allow those, costs to be taken into account. So
Does your
inflation
off-
would
does-
fit within that.
Sorry, okay. Does your office have any recourse when it comes to determining that obviously inflation, I'm sure, especially now, is the real reason probably we're seeing bills like this? Does your office have any recourse to go back to the public and provide some sort of education as to what's really happening, rather than vilifying the business when we have inflation like this? Case in point, I talked to my electric provider this morning and found out that their cost of electricity to purchase it, the electric companies, has gone up 68%. 68%. Now, by your definition, I would imagine that would be price gouging, except that it's being caused by the Biden administration and by many of the policies in this legislature. Would you be investigating that, sir, and maybe determining what has caused that?
Well, Delegate Fisher, first off, the governor would have to have declared a state of emergency for the bill to kick in. So if there's not a state of emergency, the bill there would be no price gouging.
And I think that's
law
fair.
in effect.
I get the state of the emergency, Mr. Sakamoto Wengo, but here's the issue. We are in a de facto state of emergency with inflation. So it's entirely possible the Biden administration could put us in a state of emergency as a result of the ridiculous amount of inflation that's occurring, and that you could be out there, like a cowboy going to these businesses and going, "You're the bad guys," when in fact, we know who's causing it. It's government. Do you ever take that into account when it comes to the alleged price gouging by companies?
Like I said, the bill provides for an informal resolution process before any kind of charges would be filed against a business. And during that informal resolution process, the business has an opportunity to give us the reasons and show why they're
And that's
their prices
fair, and I
were
appreciate
increased.
your latitude, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say, Mr. Sakamoto Wengo, it would be most helpful when you do engage in these kinds of cases that your office become mindful of what's really happening out there to average people with the economy when it comes to the real reason why prices are going up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Howard.
I'm sorry, did you just say charges would be leveled? After, I guess, a arbitration period, or, where you're looking for some type of solution on the why the price is the price? I'm sorry, you said there to be charges leveled?
If whatever we found was that price gouging is in fact occurring, and that there was no justification for the price increases other than, we can do it because we want to, we would then be able to file charges for violation of Maryland's Consumer Protection Act.
Okay. What does this investigatory process look like? I mean, so somebody makes a call, and you call, or maybe stop by the business or reach out to them, and what walk me through that.
Well, actually, I'd like to have Shelley Martin, who's my colleague, who
Sure.
actually oversaw the process while during the brief period we did have a price gouging law in effect, and she can talk about
Okay.
how that worked.
Okay.
And Chris, did you want to wait for Ms. Martin to testify as well? Or do you have a question that's more pertinent to Mr. Sakamoto Wingo?
No, go ahead and allow the testimony. Thank you, Chair.
Ms. Martin, I see you online. Could you go ahead and start your presentation, please?
Sure. Well, I can just jump right in and answer some of these questions about the process that we followed during the price gouging to handle.
And before you do that, if you would like to present, you only have 2 minutes. So if you have something you'd like to say, obviously, after you do that, you will be allowed to answer these questions, but I don't want to take away your presentation time if there's something you wish to say prior to dealing with these questions, okay?
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Mr. Sakamoto Wengel said, the Office of Attorney General had authority to investigate and pursue cases of price gouging due to the pandemic. There were, hundreds of complaints that our office received. So we engaged in a process to vet and review those complaints and try to focus on those that seemed to be the most meritorious. Fortunately, I'm happy to report that under the emergency statute, which applied only to price gouging by retailers, we did not find very many retailers that were actually engaging in price gouging. Some that were legally price gouging was just a misunderstanding, or they were unaware of the statute. What we also found, however, was that prices did increase for consumers in a way that they would perceive to be price gouging, but that price gouging was happening further back in the supply chain. So by the time those eggs or chicken or Lysol bottles got to your local supermarket, the supermarket was paying substantially more. And that is something that is rectified in the current bill. It applies to any person who is engaging in price gouging so that we can really address where the price gouging is happening rather than waiting for the marked up goods to get to the stores and engaging only with the stores on that question. So to deal with these hundreds of complaints, we instituted a process where when a consumer made a complaint, first our mediation unit wrote to the business and attempted to resolve it with them. If they did not get a response, or if that response was not satisfactory, we then reviewed the complaint again and assigned it to an attorney. The attorneys then contacted the businesses again to attempt to get a response to determine, if this complaint was valid, if there was a defense, such as the cost that the business was paying itself had gone up. And if not, we then evaluated whether to issue subpoenas or file charges under the Consumer Protection Act against that business. What we found is that most of the cases were resolved with one of those two initial letters. Most businesses were able to demonstrate that either they had not raised the prices and the consumer was mistaken, or that the price increase was because they in turn had incurred a cost of restocking that good that they needed to raise the price on in order to recover their costs.
Oh, and ma'am, at this point, we're going to go ahead and let the questions begin. I believe Delegate Howard.
Yeah, so it sounds like you did a little bit of remediation, tried to reach out to them, and then you had an attorney reach out to them?
Yes, the first outreach was from our office's mediation unit, and then we assigned an attorney to do an outreach effort.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you have someone other than an attorney reach out to a business to inquire? That's a little heavy-handed to me. That's something as a business owner I do when basically I'm firing a shot across the bow saying, I'm not screwing around. My next move is to put charges, court, whatever it is. That is, to me, I got to be honest with you, having an attorney reach out on behalf of the agency to a business to inquire about their pricing model, of which in many cases, by your own testimony, it is out of their control and further down the line, and probably more of a federal issue, that is disturbing to me. That is, I can see why businesses were probably a little unnerved, a little scared, especially given the nature of the circumstances of what was going on the past 23 months, 24 months in this state. That is, to me, quite frankly, that's insensitive and excessive. So I'll step down from the soapbox for a minute and just say, so after the business who's now had to respond to an attorney to justify a price increase of which there is no control, potentially, then you can file charges. Is that then you make the determination on whether to file charges or not. But in the meantime, this business who's having to deal with worker shortages, price increases, supply problems, is having to deal with an attorney representing a state agency based on a complaint by an unknown consumer. I'm guessing this is a anonymous complaint. So they're having to take their time to do this. Meanwhile, all this is going on, and then they have to justify their price. Let me ask you this: is cost of living, as you know, when things go up, things go up. It's not just gas, it's not just electric, it's across the board, right? Is that part of the equation in that justification, or is it just supply, demand? Well, the price was raised further down the line at the importer, whatever. I mean, what are those things taken into account? Because this is a very complex, system. This isn't.
So the measure of price gouging under the emergency statute is the amount that the profits increased. So what we would look at was the cost to obtain that good. But also, if there are associated costs, if the cost of labor went up, if the cost of utilities, if the rent for the space went up, whatever would figure into what accountants would call the cost of goods sold, that would factor into whether there was price gouging.
What about the cost of the electric bill of that business owner's home going up? And so in order to not lay off or let people go, they had to raise their price.
So no, that would not factor into it because that is not part of the profit of the business.
But it goes directly towards those profits do go directly towards the lifestyle of that business owner and their workers.
They do, and the statute doesn't say that the business can't raise prices at all. It
just severely limits and lets the government control how much, when, where, and on what goods and services you can raise prices on.
Well, it's an attempt to be fair to everyone and to consumers who in many cases need these goods. These are essential goods and services. And to make sure that if they, who are also having to pay more for electric and suffering from the higher cost of living and everything else that is going on, that they can still afford those essential goods and services. And that if the prices are going up, it's going up in response to a legitimate increase in costs and not because a business owner said, oh, ha, there was a huge hurricane. I know lots of people are going to need roof repairs, so let's triple the price of all of our lumber.
We already have laws into effect. I mean, OCFR can already go after people that do that. Correct? Or you have no recourse. I mean, we just heard testimony that you did.
Well, the Consumer Protection Division currently, outside of the emergency statute that was passed for the pandemic, currently does not have a way to go after those things.
And this speaks specifically to the pandemic or any state of emergency. So you still wouldn't have the power to go after those things outside of the state of emergency.
Correct. This is limited to states of emergency. I mean,
So
outside of the state of emergency, the marketplace, should in theory be self-correcting. If a merchant tries to charge too much, people will find another merchant or they will decide that they don't need that good anyway.
Mm-hmm. And this goes after 90 days after a state of emergency has been declared, or the cease and desist order, I guess, and the stop order on a state of emergency is done. Is that correct? Is that your understanding?
Yes.
That's my understanding of the bill.
No,
Yes, and that 90 days. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Steve.
Yeah,
But now,
that,
again, guys, I don't want to, I appreciate the multitude of questions here. I know we have other individuals who have to ask.
Yeah.
And Ms. Martin,
Yeah.
I know both you and Steve are attorneys, I'm assuming, correct?
yeah.
Correct.
So you guys are used to this, you're used to this line of questioning. I know there's a lot of cross-examination. I know my colleague was trying to get to the facts as he sees them. So I want to make sure for anybody else who may be speaking next, that you may not face the same, have to weather the same storm. These guys are professionals. This is what they do every day. Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, I get it. And I guess what I was getting to is that, there was some comparisons drawn to, Florida. Well, those storms are very, very short in duration, and this bill is not. So, okay, but I appreciate it. I wasn't trying to grill everybody. These guys are.
That's what they get paid to do, sir. I understand, Seth. That's why I didn't cut you off, because they know how to take these licks. I appreciate it. Chris Adams, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And
Delegate
yeah,
Adams, I apologize.
so to follow up, Chris is fine. To follow up on where Seth was headed, and I've asked this question regularly, and Steve's answered it regularly. What is the penalty for the violation of the Consumer Protection Act, the division that you are wanting to put this bill in? What does that look like?
Well, if I may answer, Mr. Chairman,
Please.
the penalties under the Consumer Protection Act, they can be up to $10,000 per violation. But that depends on a series of factors that are set forth in the act that have to be taken into consideration.
Well, the money I'm not worried about. Talk to me about whether somebody can find themselves in jail.
Well, I mean, that is, a possibility under the statute, but
Well, I mean, okay.
but it has not been, I've been with the Attorney General's office for over 30 years, and that provision has been invoked once in, my tenure there.
Well, Steve, as my chairman has said on a regular occasion, the current administration isn't necessarily going to be the future administration. And so to be blunt about this, the money's substantial. It's the fact that somebody could find themselves in jail that alerts me to the degree of seriousness for which this bill is being brought. Mac Middleton used to say on some very big bills, this is a very important bill, but it's also very controversial. And the reason why this bill is highly controversial is because you're having a debate over supply and demand, which is a microeconomic principle, and trying to decide whether government is going to say, well, no, this isn't supply and demand and the market acting in the way that we know it acts, but rather that there are unfair practices, which is subjective at best. But what's government going to do? I mean, under certain circumstances, they're going to lean toward the consumer. And that's the problem that I think Seth was really on his soapbox about. And I'm going to trip over his soapbox on the way to having the conversation with you. But you can't just use this particular law that's on the books and start just playing these kind of bills for which this is massive. It's significant. And his point, which is that the Attorney General is a strong, effective tool in the line of defense for consumers. When they show up at a private business and say, "Here I am, defend yourself," man, I mean, that's why this bill is controversial. I've got an article here. It came up right at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's on the Harvard Business School online. And it literally spends 30 minutes in a written format debating supply and demand or price gouging and the ongoing debate. And the conclusion that they come to, and it is a debate, is that government, when it starts injecting itself in the market, will create unintended consequences, which, by the way, can include prohibiting businesses from being able to be open for those essential products that you want to sell. Now, the price might be high, and there might be reasons: supply chain, cost of goods, lack of availability, back to the supply and demand conversation. But none of them are inherently mean-spirited in that aspect. And if they are, the marketplace sorts out bad actors, high-priced competitors, by saying we have a dynamic marketplace for which there are other ways to go about getting, the materials. And so I'm just going to stop here and just say that the one question I had, which is, can somebody find themselves in jail under this bill? And the answer is yes.
Thank you very much. Delegate Aaron's.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question I had earlier was about of these hundreds and hundreds of cases, how many absolutely were guilty of something and were taken to task on that?
Shelley, do you want to address that?
Sure. So of the cases that I handled, we entered into 4 what we call resolution letters with the businesses to stop the price gouging and return to the consumers any ill-gotten gains. Those are just out of the subset of cases that I handled. So there may be others that I am personally not aware of.
Of these
But
hundreds,
like I
how many
said-
were there? Of the hundreds and hundreds, how many were there that you actually performed that task?
That we did. So the one of cases that I handled, it was 4 out of a couple of hundred cases. Like I said, I can't speak for the others. But like I said earlier, what we did find was that it's not that price gouging wasn't happening, it was, but it wasn't happening at your local Safeway or Giant. It was happening at the wholesale or distribution level before those goods got to your local supermarket. And we did not have the authority to pursue that price gouging.
Why don't you have the authority? I'm confused. It's still consumer issues, and you have that authority on most every other thing, don't you?
So the way the pandemic emergency statute was written, it specifically only applied to price gouging by retailers. So it didn't apply to the
But even
wholesalers.
without the pandemic, you have authority to do that. If I called you up, we're not in a state of emergency right now, but if I called you up on the same thing, you're telling me you have no authority to do that today?
Yeah, so the Consumer Protection Act only applies to transactions between consumers and a business. So if it's a wholesaler and the end retailer, that's a business to business transaction. So normally the Consumer Protection Division would not have authority over any issues with that transaction, but the proposed bill does create that authority limited to the issue of price gouging during an emergency.
Who has that authority today?
I don't believe that anyone has that authority today.
So they
the
have
merchant,
absolute free reign to do that today.
yes, they do.
Okay, that was my point. Thank you.
And guys, we have to wrap this up. We do have quite a few more witnesses. I know Seth has another question. Delegate Queen, I believe this is your.
Yeah, just quickly, Mr. Chairman, just want to remind my colleagues that 39 states have laws and statute about price gouging during times of a pandemic. And so if there's questions about how this could be worked out or the process, we have 39 states to look at for a model. Thank you.
Thank you. Seth, last question so we can move on to the testifying witnesses.
Yeah,
please.
thank you, Mr. Chair, for the second bite. Just real quick, if that wholesaler is located out of state, what authority do you have to go after them?
So if they are doing a regularly transacting business in Maryland, we do have authority to police those transactions in Maryland. It is actually a much more complex. So if they are regularly what's called purposely availing themselves of the protections of Maryland law by regularly doing business in Maryland, if it's more of a one-off transaction, there are recent cases that are still pending in the federal courts of appeals, trying to determine what exactly the enforcement ability of one state should be over businesses in another state.
Okay, exactly. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, all right, moving on to our next witness, Allison Siborowski.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's great to be here today with you all members of the committee. I'm Allison Siborowski here today on behalf of Leading Age Maryland in support of House Bill 800, and I want to thank Delegate Queen for sponsoring this bill. Leading Age Maryland is a community of not-for-profit aging services providers. So we represent nursing homes, retirement communities, affordable senior housing, hospice, and home care organizations. Our mission is to expand possibilities for aging in Maryland and to make Maryland a better place to grow old. So price gouging by staffing agencies is a problem nationwide. In fact, on January 22nd, a bipartisan group of 195 Congress members wrote to the White House COVID-19 response team requesting an investigation into reports of alleged price gouging by nurse staffing agencies. Unfortunately, the combination of pre-existing workforce shortages, burnout and fatigue among our healthcare heroes, ongoing COVID-19 surges, and lack of restrictions on pricing that can be charged by these agencies have allowed some staffing agencies the opportunity to charge exorbitantly high rates. As a result, the healthcare sector is facing unprecedented costs. A recent poll of our members specifically found that prices charged by staffing agencies are now 20 to 80% higher than before the pandemic. This is just not sustainable. It's important to note that most long-term care is paid by taxpayers through the Medicare and Medicaid programs. Neither program is structured to respond to excessive costs, and so monies that should go to caring for residents are diverted to paying private agencies. At times, this has meant providers are paying as much as $150 to $275 an hour for an RN, and at times more than $50 an hour for a nursing assistant. Gaining protection from highly inflated staffing rates remains essential as providers in many states are limiting admissions because they don't have enough staff to care for individuals. So passage of this legislation is essential. For these reasons, Leading Age Maryland respectfully requests a favorable report for House Bill 800.
Delegate Aaron's.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Ms. Martin, how would this bill affect this case that Ms. Siborowski just spoke of? How will that help this?
So the currently pending bill does include health staffing services as an essential good or service on which price gouging would be prohibited during a state of emergency. So it would help going forward. I mean, as to the existing price increases, this bill does not address where we are right now.
Okay, supply and demand, would you actually find a case in something like this with the lack of product they have? Would you actually find them to be at fault for this? It's a supply and demand type, this is free market.
Well, it would still be handled under the rubric established by the statute, which is what did the profit margin, what happened to the profit margin. So if the price went up because they were paying more to entice nurses to work in hospitals, during an emergency where they might not otherwise choose that type of work, that's not price gouging. That is an increase in the cost of that good or service. If this is the staffing agencies saying the hospitals have no choice, let's quadruple our rates and keep a lot of profit, that could still be price gouging.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chris, Delegate Adams.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Allison, let me just say that your example is a very interesting look at it. Now, I'm not going to ask any other questions in this hearing, but let me just take this one. Isn't it, in this scenario, isn't it the worker that's price gouging? Because the worker who's working in healthcare knows that they can quit working in the place that they're hired, go work in a temp agency, and then turn around and make multiples of earnings over what they were getting in the traditional marketplace. So who's price gouging? Is it the temp agency that will gladly accept somebody who is unemployed, I guess, in this scenario, and then try to find them work? Or is it the worker who is gaming the system, understanding the roles and how they are played out, and then only using the temp agency as the method of doing that? This is a serious question because I know it's happened and it's problematic, but who's price gouging?
Thank you for the question. I think that it's a very complex issue, and I think that there have been workforce challenges in our field for a long time. Part of that challenge is really undergirded by the issue that I mentioned around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, not keeping up with what providers need to get in order to really reimburse and pay workers at a wage that is livable and makes sense. Many of our members in Maryland have raised wages for staff well beyond the minimum wage and are paying staff as much as they possibly can, sometimes using grant funding and donation funding to do that. So I think that there has to be, I think that there are cases where staff might leave and say, I'm going to go work for the staffing agency because I can make, $3, $4 more an hour. Is that individual making $100 more an hour, is being charged by the staffing agency? I've not heard of that.
Allison, my question was, that person who does that, are they the price gouger or is it the temp agency? Mr. Chairman, look, it's a fair question, but I wanted to raise it because that's what's happening in the marketplace, and it's bad in this scenario.
Thank you. Delegate Polari.
And, Allison, I've heard, especially when it comes to the medical field, that what you're now having is the price to hire nurses is getting a lot greater, because if I'm willing to take the vaccine, I'm going to be paid for it. And since the staffing is down because so many people in the healthcare field has decided that they want to have children, they don't want to take the risk of that vaccine, that they're close to retirement. So rather than take that vaccine and have future problems, they decide to retire, which is basically a shortage caused by the government. And for those that are left, they're saying, I want to be paid more. If I got to take this extra risk and colleagues in my field have been shoved out because they weren't willing to take that risk. I'm going to be paid for it. Would they be considered price gouging when the government basically has forced the increase in the shortage by Upper Chesapeake? Over 200 and some nurses are gone because they wouldn't take the shot.
Yeah, in a minute or two, let me just finish this.
Hold on, Mark.
Thank you.
Wait. Go ahead, Rick.
No, that was it. That was my question. It's, you know, and once again, the government in that case is forcing the prices to go up because with Upper Chesapeake, over 200 nurses decided, or what, they didn't decide, they were fired for refusing to take the shot.
So Rick, are you asking if the governments can be guilty of price gouging?
Causing it, yeah, causing, I mean, we're talking about hurricanes.
But under this bill, I'm asking the question, are you suggesting that the government is making a profit, ergo can be guilty of price
No,
gouging?
they're causing the tidal wave.
And are you asking her to answer that question, the affirmative?
Yeah,
Are you making a
yeah,
statement?
yes, I am. You know, is the reason for part of the problem in the healthcare industry, the fact that the government has caused so many people to lose their job, made the workforce a much smaller pool, forcing the prices to go up for those that are in the field saying, I'm going to get paid more if I'm going to be the one staying in this.
And ma'am, if this is not your matter of expertise, you do not have to answer this question. I'm not asking you to guess. I'm not asking you to take a risk.
Okay,
If
well,
you know
I'll let
the
it go with that. I
question,
think
if she
I've
knows the
made
answer,
my
that's
point.
fine.
I think I've made my point.
I definitely believe you did. I was
Yep.
waiting for the question.
All right,
All right,
thank
got to move on, guys. Jacqueline Patterson. Is there a Miss Patterson on the line? All right, we'll come back. Scott Tiffin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Jacqueline actually had another meeting that she had to go to, so she's not going to be able to make it. My name is Scott Tippin. I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Nurses Association. We have some very serious concerns, kind of related to a lot of the questions that have already been asked, but in particular, related to the inclusion of healthcare services in the bill. By including healthcare services, that will be the only form of labor explicitly included in the bill. All the other ones are not necessarily labor services. And we are concerned that could result in the capping of nursing salaries and could exacerbate nursing shortages during an emergency. I also wanted to point out that this bill is significantly different to the 2020 COVID-19 pricing statute. In that statute, the governor had to enumerate which goods and services would be covered by the prohibition on price gouging. But this bill automatically will apply it to the ones that are enumerated in the bill. And the governor could add extras if he so chose. The reason that could be a problem is that there might be state of emergencies where some of these goods and services aren't actually relevant. So for example, there was an extended state of emergency that the governor issued related to the opioid pandemic. And some of the goods and services included in this bill might not be relevant, but they would be implicated by this bill. In looking at some of our neighboring states, a lot of them really target things that consumers need to get by: food, water, shelter, those sorts of things. And by including health services in our law, we are concerned that during an emergency, some of these staffing nurses may go to other states. We have included in our testimony an amendment that we think sets a good balance between protecting the nurses, but also allowing us to go after bad actors in the agency staffing space. And as the agency office noted, it seems like that is kind of their intent. So we just want to make sure there's, good clarity around that point. So we just ask some strong consideration of our amendment, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole Stallings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Nicole Stallings here on behalf of the Maryland Hospital Association in support of House Bill 800. I want to thank the sponsor and the Office of the Attorney General for bringing this bill forward, in particular, the inclusion of health staffing services in this bill. For us, health staffing services are essential. They have been essential to enable us to continue to provide high quality care to patients during this pandemic in the midst of a shortage. While the record number of hospitalizations that we saw in this most recent chart have started to decline, our workforce shortages have not been addressed. These shortages did predate COVID. However, 700 plus days on the front lines has exacerbated the shortfalls we've seen. In my written testimony, I outline the steps that our hospitals have taken to recruit and retain staff. However, the shortages are persisting. And to meet patient needs, hospitals and providers across the care continuum have been forced to rely on temporary staffing agencies to fill the vacancies and to deliver care. And in normal times, agency rates are modestly higher, but as was mentioned by a previous commenter, what we're seeing now is 2, 3, and sometimes 4 times higher than ever before. To be clear, we recognize that these positions are in high demand. These are complex patients that we are talking about. Our concerns lie with the agencies, not with the personnel that they represent. We have serious concerns about the steep increases we have seen to rates we've never seen before. We also do not know how much of these rate increases actually makes its way to the nurses, and in fact have anecdotes of instances where these requested increases never made it to the nurses. And so we believe federal action is required, but we also believe the Attorney General should have the authority to investigate this here in Maryland, and we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And Nicole, I guess I'll follow up on the question I asked for 2 or 3 folks before you, but it really does go down to the question of who's responsible. Now you're saying it's completely the agencies that are responsible for the price gouging. I mean, you don't see nurses leaving to actually as an attraction to go to the temp agencies and therefore turn around and receive higher wages in that setting?
We do understand that this is a high demand profession. These are complex patients, and we're asking individuals to take care of them in very serious times, and this is spread across the nation. Our concern really lies with the agency. This isn't legislation that puts caps. We are seeing that being introduced in other states, but with the agencies, there is no transparency. So we don't know if how much of that rate is actually making its way to the nurse. Okay. Our field has taken steps, Delegate, to permanently increase wages well in excess of $200 million already. We'll continue to look at that, but we believe the Attorney General should have the tools to investigate potential price gouging.
So Nicole, you think I have it wrong in that the nurses aren't leaving for higher wages. You're saying that the nurses are probably getting paid same or similar wages, and that the temp agencies are charging multiples of what the normal rate is for the same services. Is that?
I do believe nurses this is an attractive offer. I understand that. But we also believe that this is worth looking into, especially when you think about situations like close to where your district is, and close to your district, where entire teams have been recruited away. It impacts patient care.
Well, I'm definitely hearing about it, and I'm listening because I don't know that this is price gouging. I see why you would support a bill like this, but this is a highly controversial bill, irrespective of the industry or the product or service. And it's because you're leaving it to attorneys in the state of Maryland to make, not their judgment calls. I mean, their degrees of determination, and that's the problem in your setting. Your setting is we're already short, and it's becoming worse because the temp agencies are in essence drawing and attracting workers away from the traditional workforce, and then turning right around and reselling it back to that same field. And I don't necessarily see that as price gouging. I see it as something else, but not price gouging. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mike Johansson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Johansson on behalf of Enterprise Holdings, rental car organization with Enterprise, Alamo, and National brands. We actually signed up support with amendments on the legislation. Enterprise does comply with the various rules in many states that have price gouging rules. It really comes down to a matter of understanding how they will be applied. On its face, the bill does not specifically include rental vehicle services. However, the governor would have the authority under the legislation to, in any particular emergency, define the scope of the price gouging to also apply to rental vehicles. We'd like to have a little bit of understanding how that would work. And for a group that isn't specifically named in the statute, perhaps there's a way to provide greater notice than something that takes effect immediately. If you aren't identified in the statute, but there's a reason that he needs to act that way, is there a way to provide more specific notice? Secondly, in other states, this is based on not more than 10% of an actual sale in a certain defined period of time prior to the emergency. Other states have actually looked at advertised prices so that if in fact you didn't have a sale, but your advertised prices were real and valid, you could be within that range. Rental cars also are very seasonal. So if the summer is our most expensive time and typically our prices go up, this legislation only looks back 60 days and wouldn't, for example, allow us to have regular June prices if our prices in April were always low. We wouldn't be able to have regular June prices. So we would suggest looking at 12 months. Lastly, when you operate in a closed environment, such as BWI Airport, pricing can change and the dynamics can change. And we saw it during the pandemic. We had many fewer vehicles, but the same operating costs. So frankly, we had to adjust pricing. Perhaps the current language covers that, but we just want some more specificity that that's okay as well. So we appreciate the committee's work on the bill.
Thank you. And then Ms. Charlotte Wood, you are last for favorable with amendments.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Crosby and Chairman Wilson. For the record, I am Dr. Charlotte Wood, the immediate past president of the Maryland Nurses Association. I have been a nurse for greater than 30 years, and the Maryland Nurses Association has a membership of 4,000 nurses approximately, and there are about 93,000 nurses in the state of Maryland. Many have contacted us and have expressed their strong concerns about this current version of House Bill 800. Nurses recognize the importance of limiting gouging the price of commodities and even specialized goods such as masks, medications, etc. However, the nursing shortage and the impact and results of the nursing shortage is cyclic, and it did not start with the pandemic. We would prefer that the health staffing services component of this bill be removed from the bill. Nurses have worked very hard and they are very dedicated, and they suffered both physically and psychologically to support each and every constituent and member of society during the pandemic. Nurses need to be compensated appropriately and have worked in many situations where they weren't compensated appropriately. This bill does not clearly articulate that salaries would or would not be impacted. In fact, it specifically enumerates health services and the labor that's associated with it. We see our amendment as important to preventing reduction of staffing during the pandemic. This particular legislation could be used to cap or limit nursing services. So we thank you for your consideration of our testimony. The Maryland Nurses Association would support this legislation with amendment and would be willing to work with Delegate Queen to do so. And I really appreciate the comments made by Delegate Adams and Delegate Rick. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Wood, you said it's cyclic. So when did this current cycle begin?
So I can't tell you the exact date that this current cycle began, but it was long. It was prior to. We were short in terms of the number of resources at the bedside long before the pandemic occurred, at least a couple of years, several years before the pandemic occurred. We have always been short in nursing education in the academic arena, because that is the arena that puts nurses out to ensure that we have adequate nurses at the bedside. So to resolve your conflict, to say is we have a steady state of less than adequate resources. However, there are more significant dips and lulls in our staffing as certain years go by. So about every 10 years, we have a fairly significant dip in resources. But if I may, Delegate Crosby, say this to add to it, many of the nurses that are out there today are over 50 years old, and a lot of us are baby boomers. That means we are looking at retiring. We are looking at the end of our, of our actual livelihood in the profession. So if we don't get a number of people, and if people aren't being paid, they're going to walk away, just like they did in some of the hospitals otherwise, or they're going to go to other states. So I just want you to know that this needs a long-term fix and not a fix that's based on this particular piece of legislation.
Thank you. Appreciate the answer. Moving on to the unfavorable. First up, Mike O'Halloran.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the House Economic Matters Committee. For the record, my name is Mike O'Halloran, representing the Mid-Atlantic Petroleum Distributors in opposition to House Bill 800. Our concern is this legislation will tie the hands of future governors, as you've kind of heard in prior testimony or questions, I should say. Look, the governor needs the flexibility to issue executive orders in response to a declared state of emergency, just as the legislature foresaw a couple of years ago, and just as the current governor did when combating the COVID-19 crisis. Specifically, MAPTA objects to codifying certain goods and services as essential. The reason being, a future state of emergency may not impact these industries, sectors, supply chains, etc. But under HB 800, those businesses would have their operations unnecessarily impacted. That's to say nothing of the specter of the Attorney General's office making a visit to their places of business. So we do oppose and we do request an unfavorable committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. Kirk McCauley.
Vice Chair Crosby, members of the Economic Matters Committee. Name's Kirk McCauley, and we represent service stations, convenience stores, and repair facilities in the state of Maryland. And we oppose HB 8 for the exact reasons that Mike just put out there. That's we don't feel that services that are essential should be listed. That should be up to the governor, give him some flexibility. We don't want him to be handcuffed at a time when all these services, the different essentials, might not be required to be in the law. So I'll leave it at that. And you have my written, and I don't want to repeat too much what Mike said. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Last witness on this bill, then Delegate Adams. I'll go to your question. Sarah Price.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members of the committee. My name is Sarah Price, and I am here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association. I am not here to defend price gouging. We appreciate where the bill is coming from, and we agree that bad actors need to be addressed, but we have issues with the bill as drafted, and those have largely been laid out in our written testimony. I want to emphasize that because there are no regulatory details included in this bill, it is very difficult to determine the impact that it could have on businesses. Our members have asked if the Attorney General will be conducting inspections, or will there be a reporting process? How will this process impact day-to-day operations for businesses? And what happens if someone makes false reports? How is that going to be verified? The last 2 years have shown us, and it has been acknowledged today, that when we experience an extended disaster or state of emergency, there are often many outside forces impacting pricing at the retail level. This proposal does allow businesses to provide evidence that the supply chain or other factors have impacted their prices, but it does not provide enough information about that process, nor does it seem to account for what the burden of proof would look like if disgruntled customers are reporting price gouging on a variety of items at the same store every day for a week, or expectations for multiple locations of a chain that have consistent pricing. The Office of the Attorney General did mention an informal process, but we have to know what that would look like. Finally, we do have serious concerns about the right of private action included in the bill. And while again, we agree that genuine bad actors need to be addressed, we think that it would be far more appropriate for that to be handled fully by the Office of the Attorney General. With that, we would urge an unfavorable report. Thank you for your time, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Delegate Adams. Your hand was up. Do you have a question?
Just real quick, and I was going to ask Mike because that's where I was thinking about it. We went through that example in an industry that is having difficulties, right? And so the problem is that the bill seems to want to deal with symptoms and not the root cause to individual issues. And when government does that, it creates unintended consequences. And I think that was your testimony, is that there are any number of reasons why prices are what they are, why the market acts the way that it acts. And rarely is it scenarios where people are taking something that costs $5 and then turn around and selling it for $500. I mean, that's the worry that we as business owners have, is this kind of bill just invites conflict where it doesn't belong. And then two, the response is the unintended consequence vis-a-vis how can a business operate during difficult times, which is what we're talking about, and not be in fear of losing the business. And I would just ask if you generally agree with that sentiment. And I mean, I think that nurse example was a prime example. That's a dynamic issue that a simple bill like, and I say simple, a bill like this, I don't think it's designed to resolve it, right?
Delegate, I've been around long enough to say, absolutely, I agree with you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 800. We'll now go on to House Bill 661. Here to present the bill is Delegate Barnes on behalf of Delegate Fennell. Delegate Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman. I'm here to present House Bill 661 on behalf of Delegate Fennell. Delegate Fennell had to rush out this morning to California for a family emergency, so I ask that you all keep her lifted up in prayer. But House Bill 661 is a common sense approach to dealing with the pervasive statewide problem of childhood obesity and adult onset obesity. It is simply said that when a restaurant offers a packaged meal that includes a drink and marks it as a kid's meal, that the default drink offering should be milk, fruit, or vegetable juice, or water. This bill is very clear that if the parents want a different option, and that the parents is free to ask for that other beverage. This is only about the first offering on the menu. The restaurant is free to grant parents' requests for a different beverage. We hope by doing this, we can help remind folks that there is a healthy choice available and that they should strongly consider it. This policy simply makes the healthy choice that much easier. The science is clear that reducing consumption of less healthy drinks can lessen the risk of unhealthy weight, health disease, diabetes, and other diet-related conditions, which more prevalent among communities of color in the country and around the country. And with all of that, I ask for a favorable report.
Thank you, Delegate Barnes. First up, we have Reed Wise.
Thank you, Chair Wilson and Vice Chair Crosby and the rest of the honorable members of the Economic Matters Committee for the opportunity to speak today. I recently had the opportunity to speak before the Senate Committee as a part of this bill to support it and speak in favor of it. For reference on my background, I am currently studying public health at a master's level at Johns Hopkins University. I'm additionally a medical student and have expertise in physiology and biophysics from my time spent earning a master's degree at Georgetown. Today, I'm grateful to share my perspective with you so that we may do the best to provide the young people of our community here in Maryland the tools to succeed in all aspects of life. Children are profoundly impacted by the world around them, and as advocates and legislators, it's our duty to ensure that their environment is as conducive to success and healthy living as is possible in today's immensely complicated world. It's been well documented in the literature, including publications from the American Association of Pediatrics, that excessive consumption of sugary beverages is linked to childhood obesity and other worsening health conditions, such as tooth decay, heart disease, hypertension, and more. Importantly, throughout their development, young people develop the habits that they will carry throughout their youth as well as adulthood. While these habits will absolutely change somewhat throughout their lifetimes, fostering healthy habits early is a great way to ensure that our students and children have the tools to take charge of their fitness in a positive way. Don't get me wrong, I like to have a sugary drink as a treat every once in a while, but the switch to water and other unsweetened beverages as the default for children's meals will give all of our students the healthiest option from day one, while still maintaining the freedom of choice for children and their families to enjoy a soda on occasion if they so desire. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak before your committee. Once again, I urge a favorable report on HB 661. I look forward to continued engagement with this bill and your committee. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Laura Hale, and then I'll get to Delegate Brooks's question. Laura Hale.
Thank you, Vice Chair Crosby, and thank you to Delegate Barnes and Delegate Fennell for this bill today. My name is Laura Hale. I'm the Director of Government Relations with the American Heart Association. Children on average drink a bathtub full of worth of sugar in a year from sugar sweetened beverages. This legislation allows for our restaurant kids meals for the first option to be a healthy option. We have seen success, and this legislation has already been in place for a number of years in Baltimore City, as well as Prince George's County recently passed it, and Montgomery County is currently considering similar legislation. This legislation, we also see that our neighbor Delaware, as well as several other states across the country, has had this type of legislation in place for this. We see that making the healthy choice, the easy choice for parents, is really successful in decreasing rates of heart disease and childhood obesity and other things. And as was noted by Delegate Barnes, parents can still choose a sugary drink, but it does say that the default option is a healthy one: water, milk, or 100% fruit juice. I also wanted to note that you may hear a little later about the potential to change the number of ounces of the juice. The juice in this legislation is 6 ounces. 6 ounces is what the research has shown us is the appropriate number of ounces for children to drink occasionally of juices. This is something that has been done extensive research in the public health community on. And we also will note that you go to the grocery store. I also did a quick Google for some of the retail supply chains. You are able to very easily get 6 ounces of fruit juice. And we would like just to note that that is important to us within this legislation. Thank you very much. And we urge a favorable report.
Thank you, Delegate Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. This is for the sponsor, Delegate Delegate Barnes. Yeah, I love the spirit and the intent of the bill, and to protect our kids. But I was looking at the penalties for violating, and I was wondering, do we feel as though it's a bit harsh? A first time offense is like $1,000 or 90 days in prison. Could you perhaps speak a little bit to how one arrived at those particular penalties?
Yeah, I might ask Laura Hale to speak on that if you don't mind.
Okay, sure.
Thank you, Delegate Brooks. So currently, that is the way that is situated in the code. We did not create new penalties. That is already existing in the code on general enforcement of when restaurants are out of compliance. We did not create new penalties within this bill. And so just the way that is situated in the code is the way that was set up specifically. We're not creating a new, if you will, penalty system, but we supported the code that already exists.
You're on mute, Delegate Brooks.
Delegate Brooks, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So this means that this restaurant could be out of compliance on a number of unrelated issues, is what you're saying? And
So,
go ahead.
so currently, the way the code is set up, when an enforcement agent goes in to do a check, say to make sure that the food standards are up to certain standards, just like they do for all kinds of compliance checks, this would be one checkbox on the list of things that they could be in or out of compliance on. We did not create a new system. This is just fitting into the current system that exists in the state of Maryland, which can certainly be another discussion you all may have about what that structure should be.
All right, and quickly, Mr. Vice Chair, how do you police this? I mean, how do you add some teeth to this? You know, I mean, how do you determine whether or not the restaurant is out of compliance or not? You know, I mean, it seems like the ultimate decision would be up to the parent when they can choose to give that child that soda as a treat, or yeah.
Mr. Vice Chair, may I address the question?
Go ahead.
The way it has been set up in our other counties and in other states is that the requirements are that that the healthy beverages are on the kids menu. So the one that you color on, that it has these as the healthy options, and as well as if there's any kind of signage that would be on this, and that would be what the compliance officers would look at to check the box saying yes, they are in compliance, or no, they are out of compliance.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So my question is, I was reading the bill, it says food service facilities. So does this apply to the cafeterias, and public schools? And does it also apply to restaurants that are privately owned?
This is specifically is for restaurants, and it's based on the way it is structured in the code. It's for all restaurants. It does not apply to public schools. That's a different setup for the purposes of the code.
So the bill applies to a restaurant that you don't own, that you think that you should be telling what they should serve in their restaurant. I just want to make that clear. Is that true?
This applies to restaurant to have the default beverage, and parents can still make a decision.
I think that's a yes. So do parents have the decision also to choose the restaurant they go to?
They do.
So then why are you trying to take away from the same parents the right to just choose, or the right from the restaurants to choose what they serve? I mean, I'm just confused, because effectively you're saying that parents don't have the right to choose where to go to eat. So therefore you want every place that's privately owned that you do not own, that you have no money invested in, you have no skin in the game for the restaurant to tell them what they can serve. Is that really what you're saying here?
What we're saying is that from public health perspective, having the default option be a healthy one is an effective way at having that first glance, that first look be a healthy one to make the decision, and parents can ultimately choose to serve.
So Laura, I hear what you're saying, but the thing is I'm a parent of 3 children, okay? If I don't like what my child is eating, of course, for a variety of reasons, and let's face it, it's all happened to all of us, I have that conversation with my child because it's my child. But what I don't do is to go into the restaurant and say, you know what your problem is? You don't serve what I approve of. You're not vegan. You serve too much meat. You serve too many sugary foods. To which the restaurant should tell you, well, then leave. Go somewhere else that does provide that, or get skin in the game and open up your own restaurant. But the fact that you're trying to create regulatory capture here, I've got a problem with it. Go ahead and comment.
Do you want to comment back, Ms. Hale?
At this time, I think we have a difference of opinion on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm sure this session, there will be plenty other discussion around right to choose. And I'm sure it'll be on a separate bill. Delegate Watson. You're on mute, Delegate Watson.
Miss Hale. And that is your name, right? Miss Hale, we address you as Miss Hale.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. I want to make sure that you know that what you're trying to do, I have a good understanding of, as we did something similar in my jurisdiction many years ago. And we, your purpose is to improve public health overall, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And while some people may disagree with the level of the projected reach, what you're trying to do is improve public health and particularly obesity in children.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Miss Hale. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Watson. Lily Baroche. Did I say that correctly, ma'am? Baroche?
It's Baruch.
Oh, Baruch. Oh, 0 for 2. I'm sorry. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi there. Thank you, Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and the honorable members of the Economic Matters Committee for giving me a chance to speak today. My name is Dr. Lily Baruch, and I'm a cardiologist at Johns Hopkins. I see patients with coronary disease, heart failure, and a lot of other cardiac diseases. And I wanted to speak up today in strong support of House Bill 661. As a physician, I see long-term health consequences of lifelong unhealthy habits that have often been established early in childhood. And I work very hard with patients to make those changes. It's exceedingly difficult to have people change their habits after 20, 30, 40 years of bad habits that have often started in childhood. It would have been a lot easier if those habits were established early, not necessarily through prescriptive or requirements, but through the ability to make healthier choices. Sugary beverages lead to obesity, diabetes, and a lot of other health problems that ultimately lead to heart disease, heart failure, early heart attacks, and strokes. This legislation makes it possible, but not required, for parents to have an easier path to helping their children make healthier choices. The delegate that was speaking earlier about requiring parents to choose something they wouldn't choose is actually not the case for this bill. Having the default menu option just means that for kids' menus to have a healthier beverage just means that that's what appears first on the menu. Parents are still completely free to choose whichever option they choose. It's not requiring different foods to be served in the restaurant. It just gives the parents an easier out so that the kids may not be clamoring for soda if they see milk on the menu. I think that this would go a long way towards encouraging children and parents to make healthier choices without any specific requirement to do so. Therefore, I think it would help public health and long-term benefit for our patients and Maryland residents. I urge a favorable report on HB 661. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Baruch. And real quick, in the background, are they all your marathon pins up there?
Some of them are triathlons and some are marathons.
Oh, okay, no big. All right, all right. Delegate Impalaria.
Thank you, Dr. Baruch. You know, I see two edges of this sword. And while some children do have a problem with obesity, it's not overwhelming. But there's a lot of children who have a problem with anorexia. And this just seems to be another bill that is telling people that you're not doing the right thing. You should have a low self-esteem because you weigh too much, or you should have a low self-esteem because you weigh too little. And, you know, people should feel comfortable with their body in the person that they are. And if they choose to carry a few extra pounds, maybe they're young and, you know, they like playing sports.
Delegate Impalaria, what does this have to do with the bill?
It has a lot to do with the bill, Delegate Crosby. It has to do with the fact that you're telling people that you have to have a certain body type and you have to live up to that. So, and if you don't, we're going to punish businesses for serving certain quantities of products. And it just shouldn't be that way. People should feel comfortable to drink what they want to drink, feel comfortable to eat what they want. You know, this is the kind of bill that leaves a young person to lead to anorexia or bulimia, because
Well, I think that's a bit of a stretch, but we can.
Well, I
debate that
think it's
when
a
we're
bit of a
voting on
stretch
the
that
bill.
drinking
And
sodas leads to obesity.
Well. okay,
That's
okay.
actually fairly well. Do you mind if I address the
Yeah,
question?
I'm asking for an answer. It's,
Go ahead,
I didn't
Doctor.
want to interrupt you. So I think that what the bill is trying to encourage healthier choices. We're not making any comment about the amount of calories that people should or should not drink. And I would be hard pressed to believe that offering milk as the first choice option or water on a kid's menu is going to lead to eating disorders. I always tell my patients it's more important to be fit than to be thin. It's more important to eat healthy than to eat less or eat more. It's about making healthier choices, not sort of making judgments about people's body types or things like that. It's really about encouraging better health in childhood through adulthood and going forward to have healthier habits and reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease and other diseases that can lead from poor dietary choices.
and I thank you for that answer, but I do feel that it is a two-edged sword, and you can give a person low self-esteem by telling them that they need to use these products when they really don't.
So I don't think there's going to be anything negative written about sodas. I didn't view that as being part of the bill. It was really just that the first option on the kids menu was going to be a healthier beverage. And that they're still free to choose other beverages. It's not that they're going to say, oh, soda is bad. It's just going to say kids menu comes with chicken fingers, hamburger, and milk, water, or juice.
Well, many of us are afraid that today it's a choice, and tomorrow that option might be gone and it's no longer a choice.
Well, that would be different legislation. That's not part of the legislation. That's
Camel's nose under the tent, as we like to say. Thank you. Thank you.
Delegate Ernst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was a wise gentleman on our committee a few years ago when we first heard this bill, and the comment came up. He says, "I call this parenting," and a lot of this falls on a parent. And I would think it would be an infringement on me as a parent. I know when my children are young and not able to make the right choices, I could make that choice for them. But I was wondering that if I did go into a restaurant with my two kids at an age and I ordered them a soda right off, am I violating the law?
No.
No, sir, no, Delegate Ernst, you're not. It is simply what is on the kids' meal as what's looking at a first offer. You as the parent can still make that decision.
Okay, and I appreciate the intent of the bill, being a couple pounds overweight myself, but I always look at something and say that personal responsibility and personal accountability. And I think we all have to start looking at what's next. Will we lose hot dogs? Will we lose this? Will we lose that? And I truly, truly believe that most parents can do a better job of parenting than the government. Thank you very much. Isn't that so?
Thank you, Delegate Ernst. You look great. Next up, we have Robin Williams.
Thank you, Vice Chair Crosby, and good afternoon to the committee. I am Robin Williams from the National NAACP. I stand in support on behalf of the State Conference of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People here in the state of Maryland. I am also a Prince George's County resident. So we know that individual health does not exist in a vacuum. It is really tied to our community conditions in which we are born, grow, live, work, and we age. For people of color, geography, income, and race are longstanding predictors of health outcomes. House Bill 661 is a common sense approach to help residents take healthier choices for our children and our communities. We know that when we reduce foods that are not healthy, and we provide options for healthier food and beverages, we can help our health conditions. So House Bill 661, it does not take soda off the menu. It is not required to take soda off the menu. It only gives children and parents an option to have water or milk or 100% juice on the menu. We also know that sugary drinks like sports drinks, energy drinks, and sodas are the leading source of added sugar in the American diet, and communities of color are disproportionately targeted in marketing and in sales, resulting in significant health disparities and health inequalities. So again, we are not asking in this bill that it removes the soda option. If a child want to have a soda pop with their dinner, they can. This bill only gives an option that you can also order a bottle of water. And so as we think we're taking options away, this is really adding an option, adding a healthy option. And for communities of colors, we don't always have that opportunity to have healthy options on menus and restaurants that are in our communities for our children. And this is parenting. This is if I want to go out and I want to just take my child out and have a meal because I don't feel like cooking. I work 2 jobs and I don't feel like cooking. But my child or I may want to have a bottle of water and not have a soda pop. And so we support this and we ask for a positive outcome for House Bill 661. Thank you, Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Rami Eck.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and members of the Economic Matters Committee. My name is Dr. Rami Eck, and I'm an epidemiologist, and I am the advocacy co-chair of the Maryland Public Health Association, which is a statewide membership organization of public health professionals. We want to thank Delegates Fennell and Barnes for introducing this bill. We are here in support of it. 2 tenets of public health that we really drive ourselves by is to improve health at a reasonable cost and to passively make our environment as healthy and as safe as possible, regardless of who is interacting with it. We do this through seatbelts, traffic lights and crosswalks, clean water protections, fluoride, and so on. You may hear these things referred to as environmental health because they address the whole environment that we interact with. These approaches are put into place at local, state, and national levels rather than the individual level because we have found certain interventions are just that effective in reducing illness and death. Individual decisions like diet and exercises are related and enhanced by environmental interventions. We don't expect everyone to test their own water for heavy metals or to inspect the kitchen of every restaurant they eat in. There are systems in place to ensure our experiences with water and food can be as safe as possible. This bill, we think, presents another way to make the passive environment healthier for everyone who interacts with it. Sugary drinks really contribute nothing nutritionally to a child's growth and well-being, but they are contributing to the obesity epidemic. About 1 in 6 youth ages 10 to 17 are obese in Maryland, ranking us 19th of the 50 states in DC. That is not a place where we want to be. Sugar-sweetened beverages are one of the single largest calorie sources for Americans instead of being an occasional treat. The overall costs for obesity are estimated at about $190 billion or 21% of annual medical spending. And one estimate for lifetime costs for childhood obesity was about $19,000 per child or about $14 billion for just all the 10-year-olds at that one-time point moving forward. We also know that most obese children remain obese in adulthood. Kids are like sponges when they're young. They learn from everything they experience. By making these the default beverages and seeing this healthy choice, we're helping them learn how to make healthier decisions from a young age. We don't let them smoke and drink alcohol. We force them to go to school. It is our responsibility to also keep them at a healthy weight. Thank you, and we urge a favorable report.
Thank you, ma'am. Sarah Ribakov.
Yes, thank you. And hello, thanks for the opportunity to speak with you all today. I'm Sarah Ribakov, a senior policy associate at the Center for Science in the Public Interest. CSPI supports House Bill 661. The bill will support the health of Maryland's children by providing healthier beverage options, but does not limit a parent or caregiver's ability to choose for their family. Leading health authorities in the US recommend limiting sugary drink intake, particularly for children, to reduce the risk of chronic diseases. When children eat out, they typically consume more calories, added sugars, and sugary drinks, and fewer fruits, vegetables, and whole grains than when they eat at home. Since restaurants are a significant source of daily calories for children, improving the nutritional quality of beverages offered to children is critical, ensuring these beverages support their health and nutrition. 4 states and approximately 24 localities have also turned to public policy to improve restaurants' children's meals in their communities. In 2018, Baltimore passed the first kids meal healthy default beverage bill on the East Coast. In 2020, Prince George's County became the first locality in the country to pass legislation that comprehensively addresses restaurant kids meals, which includes healthy default beverages. Currently, the Montgomery County Council is considering a bill that would similarly address the default beverages with kids meals, as well as the nutritional value of one meal combination. These actions across the state indicate the interest local Maryland communities have in supporting and advocating for healthy options for children and their families when they eat out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll go to favorable with amendments. Ellen Valentino.
Thank you and good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ellen Valentino. I'm here today representing Maryland's local beverage companies. You know, we recognize that parents are more than capable of making the food and beverage choices that are best for their families, particularly when it comes to the youngest children. With respect to the legislation pending before you, sometimes I'm always a stickler for facts, but this is not the language that is passed in Baltimore City, Wilmington, Delaware only, or New York. I've submitted an amendment that would align, if the committee chooses to move forward, the beverage choices and ones that as an industry we think are fair, and ones that quite frankly has been supported up until last week from advocates when they come forward. So we are aligned with the Restaurant Association on amendments should you choose to move forward. And if you have any questions of our industry, we're always happy to address them and talk about us if you want to talk about us.
Thank you. We will move to unfavorable. Melvin Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Melvin Thompson, representing the Restaurant Association of Maryland, and we are testifying in opposition to this legislation today as it is currently drafted. But if the committee chooses to move forward, we will be seeking amendments to make the requirements under this legislation more workable for the food service industry, especially for smaller independent restaurant operators. We will be requesting amendments that would allow for flavored milk to also be offered as a default beverage because it is popular with children, and a USDA final rule that was just recently in the Federal Register on February the 7th allows school systems to offer low-fat flavored milk in the National School Lunch Program to improve milk consumption. In the final rule, USDA states that milk is a popular item among children and that flavored milk has been shown to encourage milk consumption. And we think restaurants should also be allowed to offer flavored milk as the default beverage in children's meals. And we'll also be offering amendments to change the serving size limit for juice and water combinations from 6 ounces to 8 ounces. We think that limiting that serving size to only 6 ounces creates an unnecessary burden because it would prohibit restaurants from using commonly available and affordable sizes. And we don't know of any other state or local law that limits such beverages to 6 ounces. In fact, as Ellen said, similar laws in Baltimore City and Prince George's County also allow for 8-ounce serving sizes, and state legislation should allow for the same. So thank you very much for your time, and we will be reaching out to the sponsor to discuss these amendments as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. That concludes this bill hearing. I want to thank again Delegate Barnes for stepping in, and please, again, as he mentioned at the start, keep Delegate Fennell in your prayers. We'll now go to House Bill 572, Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for the opportunity. For the record, Delegate Jared Solomon, District 18. Appreciate the opportunity today to present on the Open to All Act, which we think is pretty common sense and really builds off of some of the work that's been done in some of our largest jurisdictions in Salisbury and Howard County and Baltimore City. You're going to hear from folks later today shortly about their experiences. And what this bill would do is basically require that a single-use bathroom, which is something that is defined as essentially a fully enclosed restroom that has one toilet or a urinal and has a door that locks. So, we all probably use them when we got up this morning in our house or in our hotel room, or if we've recently been on an airplane, or back in the days when we were in person, the bathrooms in our committee hearing rooms as well. And so what this bill would say is if you have a bathroom like that, rather than have a sign that says men's or women's room, it is just a bathroom. It's open to anyone, regardless of gender, provides a safe and a welcoming space for all individuals in our community, particularly those with disabilities and their caregivers, nursing mothers, seniors, parents of young children. We know that, sometimes having to make the choice, if you've got your child with you, or if you are a caregiver, and you're going to hear from folks later today who have had to make those decisions, it can be really difficult. And on the practical standpoint, we've all probably been at a restaurant or a retail establishment where we've waited in a line and there's another bathroom with a lock, just a toilet that we didn't feel comfortable going into for one reason or another, or maybe our spouse didn't feel comfortable going into. And so that really is what this bill is about. It's making the community open and accessible to all, folks who may identify in a different gender, and for families who are just looking to be able to get in and out quickly. I mentioned that this is something that is on the books in a couple of other jurisdictions, and you're going to hear from them shortly. It's also on the books in states and cities across the country like Illinois, Nevada, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York. All have essentially laws requiring that single occupancy restrooms are gender neutral. It's actually also in the International Plumbing Code. That best practice is that essentially all single occupancy restrooms should be gender neutral. So happy to take any questions. Again, you're going to hear from a lot of different witnesses. I would just like to mention, I don't know if they're going to be able to join us, but there's been testimony submitted from the Retailers Association as well as the Restaurant Association. We've worked extensively with them really over the last 2 years. We started working on this bill prior to COVID. They have no opposition to the bill. They've been great partners to work with, and you'll see in their testimony that that's reflected. We worked out to make sure that this is there is no criminal penalty, there's a civil penalty, a warning, and again, in the jurisdictions that have done this, we've really found no instances of anybody even being fined. It's just been as soon as folks are warned and noticed that the rule has changed, and they've been more than happy to follow it. You're also going to hear from some businesses who have implemented this themselves, and I know there's testimony as well. Vince Collada, in particular, from Cured in Howard County, wanted to really be with us today. Unfortunately, his schedule changed at the last minute, but he did submit written testimony. And again, these signs can be changed for as little as literally $15. So we're not trying to be overly burdensome or prescriptive. We just want to make sure that we're doing something that's fairly common sense and again makes our community open to everybody. So with that, happy to take questions, and again would urge a favorable report.
Thank you, Delegate. First, we'll go to fellow National Guardsman and the Mayor of Salisbury, Jake Day.
Chairman Crosby, thank you so much. Can you hear me all right? Excellent. My name is Jake Day, and I'm here as a representative of a Maryland jurisdiction who has adopted this policy. When we adopted a gender inclusive restroom ordinance approximately 2.5 years ago, we did so because we take pride in declaring that all are welcome here. It's a saying on banners on our main street. Promoting gender neutral inclusive restrooms was simply another way by which we could lead by example by supporting our welcoming words with impactful action. It's important to bear in mind that this bill, as was noted by Delegate Solomon, only applies to single occupancy bathrooms fully enclosed, containing one toilet with a door that locks. When Salisbury adopted this policy, we received full support from many different corners of the community, but most importantly from the small businesses and from our chamber and the business community. We also were able to pass this unanimously through City Council, so we had the full support of all of our council members. There are a number of reasons why supporting House Bill 572 is, in my opinion, important. And the first of which is, just like a toilet, a bathroom functions the same for all. And secondly, that it's simply the right thing to do. I want to close by sharing that as daddy to 2 daughters, there have been many times where they see either the symbol or the word and say, "Daddy, you can't go in there with me into the women's room," or "Daddy, we don't want to go in there with you to the men's room." And then there's the uncomfortable standing outside of the quote unquote wrong restroom. What that leads to is obviously not being there with your child to help them in a moment of need, and that can lead to all sorts of other challenges with young children. So I know that parents will understand this. So it's again important to me that we move forward with this bill statewide. I am in favor of this, and we have found no instances in Salisbury of any violation at this time. And as has been noted, that education is really what it comes down to. We've worked closely with our businesses just to advise them of the policy. Many weren't aware when it went into effect, and we've simply had a gentle conversation, and it has been handled amicably. So I ask for a favorable report, and thank you so much for your time.
Mayor Day, appreciate it, and taking cover and concealment to a new level. You covered up your camera there with your speech, but thank you for your service, and thanks for coming in today.
I apologize for that.
No, you're good. You're good. About midway through, you just kind of disappeared. I was like, what is going on? Delegate Mounts, do you have a question?
I was just waving to the mayor.
Oh, all right. Next up, we have Kenneth Capone. I saw Mr. Capone in here.
We may have lost him.
He's off mute and in. Okay, I'll come back to him next. Let's go to Christina Rigby.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and members of the Economic Matters Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony to the committee today. I'm Christiana Rigby, and I have the honor of representing District 3 on the Howard County Council. I'm here to express my strong support for HB 0572, legislation introduced by Delegate Solomon that will promote access to bathrooms for all Marylanders. The purpose of this legislation is to make single-user public restrooms in Maryland available to all individuals, regardless of gender, and to require that the signage for these single-user bathrooms is gender inclusive. This legislation makes a simple but important change to public restrooms in our state, ensuring that the restroom is a safe and comfortable experience for all members of our community. It is a low-cost, common-sense measure that makes a world of difference to so many people. The legislation, like Mayor Day mentioned, is really for all of us. It's for families with young children like my own who have very similar conversations to Mayor Day's, who are often in need of a single user restroom and are limited by availability. It's also for transgender and non-binary community members who often feel unwelcome in public restrooms in places that are exclusionary. This legislation benefits caretakers and people with disabilities who would benefit from greater access to single-user bathrooms. Last year, the Howard County Council unanimously passed local legislation to implement this important change in Howard County. This issue received broad and bipartisan support because we recognize that this legislation is simply about ensuring that public places and accommodations serve all members of the public. Thank you for your consideration of this legislation. I respectfully encourage a favorable report, and I'd be happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you. Is it Councilwoman Rigby?
Yes.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Alyssa Strader.
You know what, Mr. Chair, we actually just got a text from her. Her car broke down and her phone died. And then somebody in her car, I think, texted us. So she is unfortunately not going to be with us. She's the owner of Glory Donuts in Frederick, and I would highly recommend if you're out there, their food is incredible. But she has written testimony that she submitted, and I think we have Mr. Capone back with us. Thank you.
Okay. Hopefully everything is okay. Ken Capone.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Ken Capone. I am the Director of People on the Go at Maryland, which is Maryland's statewide self-advocacy organization. Today I am representing People on the Go and also the Developmental Disabilities Coalition. We are testifying in support of HB 572, Places of Public Accommodation and Public Buildings, Gender Inclusive Signage. I, along with many people with disabilities who require daily supports, like many people with disabilities do, I have two direct support professionals of the opposite gender who assist me with my daily needs. When we go out and I have to go to the bathroom, I usually have to wait until I get home if there's only gender-specific bathrooms available. And that's not good for anybody to have to wait to go to the bathroom. But if there were gender-neutral bathrooms available, I, along with my direct support professionals, would feel comfortable going in, and it would be better for my health. We are appreciative of the sponsor's inclusion of language requiring both text and symbol on any sign. This enables all members of the public to quickly identify the location of an appropriate bathroom facility. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Michelle Hoffer.
Hi, thank you, Delegate Crosby and the members of the Economic Matters Committee. My name is Michelle Schlehofer Copper, and I'm here representing PFLAG's Salisbury out of Salisbury, Maryland. And we submitted testimony in favor of HB 572. As you heard from Mayor Day, the city of Salisbury has already passed a resolution making all single stall bathrooms have gender neutral signage. The gender neutral bathroom ordinances are beneficial for transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people because these people can now access bathrooms without needing to be gender policed by other patrons or business staff. All too often, gender non-conforming individuals face serious safety and harassment risks when using public bathrooms, and a gender neutral bathroom option allows everyone to feel safer in public spaces. As you've heard from others, there's also benefits to people who are gender conforming if they have family members or caregivers who require entry into the bathroom that are opposite sex and can help them use bathroom facilities. They're also beneficial to people with shy bladder syndrome and shy bowel syndrome, which are conditions where somebody may not be able to use the restroom comfortably in the presence of others. So it would increase bathroom access for them as well. And finally, they help alleviate long waits commonly associated with female restrooms, better known as potty parity. And they give businesses more options when facilities are out of order, as well as saving building space and energy use. And when we were advocating for this policy in the city of Salisbury, the American Restroom Association actually reached out to our PFLAG chapter, very excited with and in support of the bill. So we do want to recognize their assistance in providing us with talking points. We are looking for a favorable report from committee, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And real quick, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. This bill is jointly signed with HGO, and I do want to welcome Delegate Segalia. I don't see anybody else, though, at the moment on here from HGO, but just want to welcome those committee members. Next up, we have Allison Siborowski.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and hello to members of the committee again. For the record, my name is Allison Siborowski. I'm the president and CEO of Leading Age Maryland. We're an association of more than 135 not-for-profit aging services organizations across the state. We represent nursing homes, affordable senior housing, continuing care communities, and home and community-based services. And we work to partner with consumers, caregivers, researchers, public agencies, faith communities, and others who care about aging in Maryland. We are here today in support of House Bill 572. Other states, as it's been noted, have passed similar laws, as have other jurisdictions in Maryland, and the benefit reaches beyond what some may consider controversial issues. Having gender-inclusive signage would better support caregivers. This law would also promote a greater sense of inclusion and access for all Marylanders, and such a law specifically we feel would be impactful for older adults who need assistance and may have a caregiver of the opposite gender, such as a spouse. Passage of this bill would provide seniors with the dignity that they deserve. For these reasons, Leading Age Maryland respectfully requests a favorable report for House Bill 572. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee Blinder.
Thank you so much to Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and the Economic Matters Committee for hearing this important legislation today. My name is Lee Blinder. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the Executive Director of Trans Maryland, and I'm a very proud non-binary transgender Marylander. Trans Maryland is a multiracial, multigender community power building organization for Maryland's trans community. We enthusiastically support HB 572. This bill equitizes bathroom access for Maryland residents statewide. Maryland's transgender and intersex communities face specific challenges when accessing basic bodily needs, such as restrooms, healthcare, housing, and personal safety. This bill lowers that barrier to access. Gender nonconformity has existed since the beginning of time. Due to the violence of colonial systems, trans people are subjected to violence at higher rates, and this rate is even higher for Black and Brown, non-binary, and gender expansive trans people. Non-binary, gender nonconforming, gender expansive, and intersex people who do not have a binary gender presentation are often forced to choose a non-affirming and potentially dangerous restroom, or to incur health problems like urinary tract infections as a result of being precluded from using a public restroom. Being perceived as entering the wrong restroom is dangerous. It increases the likelihood of violence, and it reinforces the minority stress that is disproportionately incurred by Maryland's trans communities. This bill is crucial to ensuring Maryland can compete for business with nearby states that have already codified law on this matter, including Washington, D.C., which did this in 2006, and also Philadelphia. Locally, Baltimore City, the city of Salisbury, as you've already heard, and then Howard County have codified this. It's time for Maryland to demonstrate leadership in its values of non-discrimination and access for all. We urge a favorable report on HB 572. Thank you.
Thank you. Janelle Bruce.
Okay, I am here. My name is Reverend Janelle Bruce, and I am the founding pastor of the Church Without Walls Global Reach, which is located in Prince George's County, Maryland, and we are a Christian organization. As the pastor of the Church Without Walls, we stand in support of HB 0572. And this bill utilizes, equitizes bathroom access for all of Maryland residents statewide and shows the love for all of humanity that Christ intended. So utilizing the bathroom is one of our most basic human needs, and every person should be able to take care of their human needs with their dignity intact. And it's interesting how things happen. I had some ice cream and Pizookie from BJ's yesterday, and I've literally been up since 3 o'clock in the morning in and out of the bathroom. And if this is making us uncomfortable, I'm glad, because imagine being uncomfortable and not being able to use the bathroom when you need to relieve yourself. Imagine having to fear for your safety, or wondering if you're going to get different looks or stares at people, or having that small child and not having a way to relieve yourself or to change them, or an adult with a disability. So these are all of the reasons that we need to actually support this bill. It makes sense for the economy, but even more so, it is morally and it is justly, and it is a bill that is so important for all of humanity. It shows love. And again, it's nothing that is something that adds to privilege. Again, this is a basic human need. So I, on behalf of the Church Without Walls, ask that you support HB 0572, as this is absolutely a moral and just piece of legislation that will benefit many current and potential Maryland residents. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Alan Richardson. You are off mute for, yep, there you go, sir. You're good.
Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon, Vice Chair Crosby and members of the committee. My name is Alan Richardson, and I'm here today in support of House Bill 572, the Open to All Act. I've lived in Maryland for over 70 years. And during that time, my wife, Sarah, and I greatly enjoyed going out to restaurants and to theater and music performances. Unfortunately, in recent years, Sarah battled both dementia and a severe loss of mobility. In spite of this, she continued to find great comfort in these outings. They gave us the chance to retain an important part of our lives. But there were problems. At first, it was difficult simply for Sarah, who had become easily confused, to manage trips to the ladies' restroom alone because she would forget where she was. Then later, when she became wheelchair bound, she was completely unable to manage without assistance. Although there were sometimes restrooms for those with disabilities, she could not use these alone, but more often there were not. And I had to decide whether to try to bring her into the men's restroom or to hire our daytime female caretaker for the evening to assist her. This added a layer of stress and expense to our evening that we did not need. There are not easy solutions to all of these problems usually, but the Open to Air Act would make a simple giant step forward at many venues by providing free access to all its single-use bathrooms. That would help us manage by ourselves most of the problems we experienced. We all want to be able to go out to enjoy events in Maryland, and it goes without saying that none of us want to worry about how to access a restroom, regardless of our sex or the state of our disability. I thank you for considering this bill and ask for a favorable report.
Thank you, sir. And our final witness today, Maureen Van Stone.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Crosby and committee members. My name is Maureen Van Stone, and I am the director of the Maryland Center for Developmental Disabilities at Kennedy Krieger Institute, which is Maryland's University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, Education, Research, and Service. I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony in favor of House Bill 572. My organization, Kennedy Krieger Institute, is dedicated to improving the lives of children and adults with developmental, behavioral, cognitive, and physical disabilities. Kennedy Krieger's services include inpatient, outpatient, school-based, and community programs like the Maryland Center for Developmental Disabilities. The Maryland Center for Developmental Disabilities mission is to provide leadership that advances the inclusion of people with disabilities through pre-service preparation and training, research and evaluation, community service and technical assistance, and information dissemination. National data indicate that approximately 20% of the US population is living with a disability. As a provider for individuals with disabilities, Kennedy Krieger feels strongly that all people deserve privacy and safety when using a public restroom. Gender-inclusive restrooms in public spaces are important for the patients, students, and families whom we serve at Kennedy Krieger Institute. A single occupancy public restroom is defined as fully enclosed, containing only one toilet, and may be locked by the user. Often, the user of a restroom is an individual, child or adult with one or more disabilities who requires caregivers and/or direct support professionals to assist them with their toileting needs and to assure privacy by being able to lock the restroom door on behalf of the individual whom they are serving. In many instances, the caregiver or the direct support professional is not the same gender as the person whom they are serving. I urge a favorable report for House Bill 572, and I appreciate your consideration of my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 572 and the hearings for today in ECM. Members,